All right, get ready because we're diving into some seriously complex stuff. Today's deep dive, we've got melanin, black holes, language, and ancient myths. It's going to be wild.
Definitely a lot of different fields, but the thing that ties it all together is, this idea of hidden connections between things that seem totally different.
Okay, so one of the sources, inside black God, jumps into melanin, that pigment that gives our skin color. But it goes way deeper, suggesting that melanin's almost like a mini black hole, converting light into energy.
Hmm.
Is that even scientifically possible?
Well, it's definitely a bold claim, but it's interesting how it connects the really small with the really big, right? So black holes, regions of space-time where gravity is so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape. And then melanin, a molecule that absorbs light and it seems transforms it.
Yeah.
So the source proposes that melanin could be functioning like a tiny, tiny black hole inside the human body.
Okay, if we're going with this melanin as a mini black hole thing, how does that even connect to language?
Right. Specifically, how language has shaped, how we understand race. One source uses Little Black Sambo as a starting point. Honestly, it's one of those stories I remember it from childhood, but I haven't really thought about it critically.
It's a good example of how a story that seems simple can have all these layers of meaning and cultural baggage. The source points out that the name Sambo actually comes from Shambhu, or Sambhu, which is a name for Shiva.
Wait, so a children's book character's name is rooted in Hindu mythology.
Exactly.
That's unexpected.
It is, and it brings up some interesting questions. So Shiva in India is often depicted with black skin. And in that cultural context, black skin is associated with power and divinity.
Okay.
But in America, Sambo and images of black figures with exaggerated features like red lips have been used in minstrel shows and other types of entertainment that just promote racial stereotypes.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast for sure. So how did that shift in meaning even happen? How did a name and imagery associated with divinity in one culture become a tool for racial prejudice in another? The source suggests that the Christianization of slaves might have played a role. So as enslaved Africans were forced to convert to Christianity, they might have lost their awareness of the Hindu context of the name Sambo.
Right.
And this, combined with the deliberate manipulation of imagery by people in power, led to, the association of Sambo and similar imagery with negative stereotypes.
So you're saying that the original meaning, which was rooted in a spiritual tradition that revered blackness, was basically erased and replaced with a distorted version that served a completely different purpose.
Exactly. And that purpose, as the source implies, was to justify the exploitation and oppression of black people.
Right.
By associating blackness with negative stereotypes, those in power could maintain the social hierarchy.
It really makes you think about how images and language can be, weaponized, I guess, to reinforce power structures.
Absolutely. The source points to the early American music industry as a prime example. Their capitalization on minstrel shows and blackface. These forms of entertainment, they deliberately distorted and mocked black culture.
Yeah.
And that further solidified negative stereotypes in, the public's mind.
It's like a stark reminder that what we might consider entertainment or even harmless children's literature can actually be deeply ingrained with harmful ideologies. What's implied here is a deliberate effort to manipulate the public perception of blackness.
Precisely. And the source argues that this manipulation had a profound impact on the way black people were perceived and treated, and it contributed to a system of racism that still exists today. Even the protests against the Little Black Sambo story, while seemingly about the racist imagery, might have been influenced by the loss of the original Hindu context.
So in a way, the very act of protesting the story, even though it was justified, might have inadvertently reinforced the negative associations that had been imposed on it.
That's the complexity the source highlights. It shows how manipulating language and imagery can have a ripple effect, obscuring the original meaning and perpetuating harmful stereotypes. And it makes you wonder, what other distortions are we living with, and how are those distortions shaping our reality?
That's a deep question, and one that I think we need to keep asking ourselves as we go deeper into these sources. It makes you realize that we need to be constantly questioning the narratives we've been given and looking for those hidden meanings that might be right there beneath the surface.
It's amazing how, something like a children's book can bring up such a deep conversation about language, power, and how racial stereotypes are constructed. And this idea of manipulating people through language, it's not limited to just one story or one culture, is it? It seems like it happens over and over again throughout history.
You're so right. Makes you wonder, how much of what we think is real is actually like a carefully made-up story designed to, benefit certain people or groups? Some of our sources talk about this idea of a language field. It's kind of hard to grasp, to be honest.
Right.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, it is a complex concept. Think of it like, imagine a web. This web connects every thought, every word, every meaning. And this web, this language field, is constantly being woven and rewoven by the language we use, the stories we tell, the images we share. The source suggests that this language field isn't just a passive background, but an active force that shapes reality.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the connection. So if this language field is so powerful, then manipulating it, like we saw with the Sambo example, can have a huge impact on how we see the world and each other.
Exactly. The source argues that those in power understand this, and they use it to their advantage. By controlling the narrative, they control how people perceive reality. It's subtle, but it's incredibly powerful.
It's almost like magic, using words and symbols to shape the world around us.
The source actually compares it to that. It draws parallels between this concept of the language field and those ancient mystical traditions that believed in the power of sound and vibration to create and transform reality.
So are we saying that, ancient cultures might have understood these principles better than we do today?
That's what some of the sources suggest. They point to the reverence for language in these ancient traditions, like Egyptian hieroglyphs, Hindu mantras, the oral traditions of indigenous cultures.
Okay, but let's bring it back to now. If this language field is so powerful, can we use it to challenge and dismantle these harmful narratives that are already out there, like the ones that are in our collective consciousness?
The source believes we can. It suggests that by being aware of how language shapes our reality, we can consciously choose the words and stories we want to amplify. We can create new narratives that are more inclusive, more just, more aligned with the reality we want to live in.
So we could reweave this language field, create a more positive and equitable world through our language.
Exactly. It's recognizing that we're not just passive recipients of language, we're active participants in creating it. We have a responsibility to use language in a way that uplifts and empowers rather than dividing and putting people down.
This is starting to feel, empowering. Okay, maybe we can't change the past, but we can change the story we tell about it. We can reclaim language and use it to build a better future.
That's a powerful way to put it. And this idea of reclaiming language is closely tied to the concept of melanin, which we were talking about earlier. The source suggests that melanin, beyond its role in pigmentation, might be crucial in how we interact with this language field.
Wait, hold on. How does melanin fit in here? We were talking about it being like a mini black hole, converting light into energy. How does that connect to language and consciousness?
The source suggests that melanin, with its unique properties, might act as a kind of antenna. It might allow us to tap into the energy and information that flows through this language field.
So you're saying melanin could be the key to unlocking a deeper level of awareness and understanding.
It's one way to look at it. The source proposes that melanin might be essential for us to reach higher levels of consciousness and connect with the wisdom within that language field.
Okay, but if melanin is so crucial, does that mean people with more melanin, have a greater capacity for this kind of awareness?
The source doesn't say that. It acknowledges that we all have melanin, regardless of our skin color, and everyone has the potential to tap into this deeper consciousness.
So it's not about biology dictating everything, but understanding the potential in each of us, regardless of what we look like.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that everyone can go on this journey of awakening. Melanin, as a potential catalyst for this process, is something to be celebrated and explored, not used to create hierarchies or divisions.
It's like a paradigm shift, a way of seeing the world that goes beyond those superficial differences and recognizes that we're all connected.
That's exactly what the source is getting at. It's a call for a more holistic and inclusive understanding of humanity, recognizing the unique gifts and potential in each of us.
This is incredible. To think that melanin, something we usually only talk about with skin color, could be the key to unlocking these deeper levels of consciousness and understanding. There's another piece to this conversation we haven't really touched on yet. DNA.
Right. DNA, often seen as the blueprint of life, the instructions for how our bodies are built and how they work. But the source we're looking at today suggests that DNA might be much more than just instructions.
Right.
It proposes that DNA could actually be a form of language, a resonant language that interacts with this broader language field we've been talking about.
Wait, DNA is a language. I get the blueprint analogy, but how can a sequence of molecules be considered a language?
It's about shifting how we think about language. If we think of language as a system of symbols that convey meaning, then DNA, with its arrangement of nucleotides, can definitely be seen as a code that carries information.
I see that, but we're talking about more than just, genetic information, right? This source is saying that DNA is like actively communicating with something beyond the physical body.
Exactly. The source proposes that the specific sequences of those nucleotides in our DNA, they might create unique vibrational patterns. And these vibrations could be resonating with the language field, exchanging information that goes beyond just the physical realm.
So it's like our DNA is a tuning fork vibrating in harmony with this universal language field.
That's a great way to put it. And the information being exchanged, according to the source, could be pretty profound. It suggests that our DNA might be receiving and transmitting information about, well, things like our ancestral lineage, our hidden talents and potentials, even our karmic patterns.
Hold on. So you're saying our DNA is like a cosmic library card, giving us access to this huge amount of information passed down for generations, that we're connected to something way bigger than ourselves.
That's the core idea. It challenges us to see DNA not just as a static blueprint, but as a dynamic, interactive part of us, constantly talking to this field of information that goes beyond our individual bodies.
But if this is true, wouldn't that mean that, our destinies are, to some extent, already decided? If our DNA is carrying information about, like, our karmic patterns, does that mean there's no free will?
That's a huge question, and the source doesn't say it has all the answers. But it does suggest that understanding DNA this way doesn't erase free will. It actually expands it.
Okay.
It argues that by becoming aware of the patterns and potentials in our DNA, we can make more conscious choices about how we live.
So it's not about being, controlled by our DNA, but about using this knowledge to empower ourselves and create the reality we want. Like, we're given a roadmap, but we still get to choose which path to take.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we have both a personal and a collective history encoded within us. And by understanding this history, we can understand ourselves and our place in the world better.
This is all so mind-blowing. But I have to ask, where does the concept of race fit into all of this? If we're all interconnected through this language field and share this universal language of DNA, do traditional ideas about race even make sense anymore?
It's a crucial question. The source suggests that understanding DNA as this resonant language could totally change how we understand race and human connection. If we're all tapping into a shared language field, then the idea of separate races becomes less about biological difference and more about variations in how we express this underlying code.
So instead of seeing race as a dividing line, we could see it as a spectrum of expressions within this unified field of consciousness, like different instruments playing different notes, but all part of the same symphony.
That's a beautiful way to put it. This shift in perspective, the source argues, could be the key to dismantling those harmful narratives of racial superiority and inferiority that have been around for far too long.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today. From melanin as a mini black hole to DNA as a resonant language. It's like we've peeled back layers of reality and found this deeper, more connected world. What's the one thing you really want listeners to walk away with from all of this?
If there's one thing to take away, it's this. We are more than what we seem. We're beings of energy and light, connected to each other and to the cosmos in ways we're just beginning to understand. By embracing this connection and exploring the hidden depths within ourselves, we can tap into this incredible potential for healing, transformation, and evolution together.
What a powerful way to wrap things up. It's been an incredible journey, and I have a feeling these questions we've talked about today will stick with us long after we're done. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into something pretty interesting. We're going to be looking at the children's book, Little Black Sambo, through the lens of another book, Inside Black God.
Oh, wow.
Little Black Sambo has its share of controversy. But for this deep dive, we're going to be setting those concerns aside. And we're really going to be focusing on the characters themselves and seeing if we can understand them in a new light, using the framework presented in Inside Black God.
That sounds fascinating. Inside Black God kind of puts forth this idea that reality is shaped by language, which might seem a little out there at first, but if we, apply that idea to Little Black Sambo, it could offer some pretty interesting insights.
Okay, so for our listeners who might not be familiar with Inside Black God, can you give us a little breakdown of some of its key ideas, especially the ones that might help us understand the characters in Little Black Sambo?
Sure. So one of the central concepts in Inside Black God is that blackness, as they define it, represents the fundamental unifying principle of the universe. It's like the raw potential from which everything emerges. If you can imagine the universe before the Big Bang, in that state of pure energy, that's kind of what they're getting at.
So how does this concept of blackness as this primordial force connect to the characters in Little Black Sambo?
Well, one way to look at it is through the character of Sambo himself. He starts the story, in this kind of simple state, almost untouched by the complexities of the world. In a way, he embodies that raw potential, that blackness that Inside Black God describes as like the starting point for everything.
That's really interesting. So we're seeing Little Black Sambo not just as this character in a children's story, but as like a potential representation of this fundamental universal principle.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And, this kind of ties into another key idea from Inside Black God, and that is language as a shaping force.
Okay.
The book argues that words, sounds, even symbols, all carry energy and information, and that this energy, it directly influences our experiences and how we perceive reality.
So how might this concept of language apply to Little Black Sambo's journey? Because he does encounter all those obstacles, those tigers.
Right.
And he seems to overcome them through his wit, his cleverness.
Yeah, that's a great observation. What if we view Sambo's journey as him navigating this language field? He uses his cunning, his intelligence, his command of language to overcome those challenges. The tigers could be seen as representing these forces of chaos and opposition that he has to overcome, almost like tests in this language field.
So the tigers aren't just scary creatures in the story. They actually symbolize these deeper forces that Sambo has to confront.
Yeah, precisely. And his ability to outsmart them, to use his words effectively, kind of demonstrates his mastery within this language field.
Okay, this is getting really interesting. So we're seeing Sambo as embodying this fundamental blackness, navigating a reality shaped by language, facing these challenges that represent these forces of chaos. What other insights from Inside Black God can we apply here?
Well, the book also places a lot of emphasis on melanin, the pigment that gives skin its color. And according to Inside Black God, melanin is more than just a physical attribute. It's described as playing a vital role in how people interact with this universal language field.
Wait, hold on. Melanin, you're saying, has something to do with language and shaping reality. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating concept. Inside Black God suggests that melanin acts as a kind of antenna, allowing those of African descent to tap into deeper levels of understanding and connection with the universe.
So if we apply that to Little Black Sambo, could his blackness, his melanin, actually be a source of strength? Is that what allows him to so effectively navigate this language field and overcome those tiger challenges?
That's a really insightful question. And, we are looking at Little Black Sambo through a very specific lens here, the perspective presented in Inside Black God. And within that framework, it's certainly a very thought-provoking interpretation.
Okay, so we have Sambo as this embodiment of this primordial blackness, using his mastery of language to overcome these challenges, and potentially drawing strength from his melanin. Where do we go from here? There's still a lot more to this story. What about those tigers melting into butter?
That always struck me as a bit strange when I was a kid.
Right, yeah. That's where things get even more interesting. Remember how Inside Black God talks about cycles? Creation, destruction, and renewal. Those tigers, which we've kind of interpreted as representing challenges, they don't just disappear. They undergo this remarkable transformation.
Well, the melting butter, that's not just like a random quirky detail in the story. It's actually symbolizing something deeper.
Precisely. It could be interpreted as a form of renewal, a kind of alchemical process where chaos and opposition are refined into something beneficial.
And this would tie back into the idea of language shaping reality, right?
Okay.
Sambo's cleverness, his use of language, it not only allows him to escape the tigers, but it also transforms the very nature of the challenge itself. Exactly. It highlights this concept that that we have the power to actually change our circumstances, to transform negativity into something positive through our understanding and our command of language.
This is really making me rethink this whole story. It's like
Mm-hmm.
those pancakes that his mother makes after the tiger's milk.
Yeah.
They're not just a reward for Sambo. They represent something more, right?
Absolutely. Remember how Inside Black God emphasizes self-knowledge as a key to unlocking potential. Those pancakes could be seen as a manifestation of Sambo's self-discovery. You know, he confronts the tigers, he learns from those encounters, and then he transforms that experience into something nourishing and life-sustaining.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The pancakes symbolize like the fruits of his journey, the tangible results of his growth and understanding.
And let's not forget the act of sharing. You know, Sambo shares those pancakes with his parents, which speaks to another key theme in Inside Black God, the importance of using knowledge and understanding for the benefit of others.
Wow. So we have this whole layered meaning embedded in these seemingly simple pancakes. It's amazing how much depth we can find in these stories when we look at them through a different lens.
It speaks to the power of symbols and archetypes. You know, they allow us to explore complex concepts and universal truths in ways that can be both entertaining and profound.
Okay, so we've covered Sambo's journey, the tigers, the butter, even the pancakes. But there's still one character we haven't really talked about. Sambo's father. He doesn't really do much in the story except wear those tiger skin clothes at the end.
But that detail is crucial. Remember how Inside Black God talks about blackness representing the void? The emptiness that contains infinite potential? Sambo's father, by donning those clothes, could be seen as embodying this concept.
Wait, the void. How does that connect to wearing tiger skin clothes?
Well, the void isn't actually empty. It's teeming with potential energy and possibility. And inside Black God, this concept of the void is directly linked to blackness as this like primordial creative force.
So are you saying that Sambo's father, by wearing the remnants of those challenges, is somehow embodying this infinite potential that's associated with blackness?
It's a fascinating interpretation, isn't it? He takes on the aspects of those challenges, integrating them into himself, and in a way, transcending them.
This is getting pretty deep. I'm starting to see how even the smallest details in Little Black Sambo can take on new meaning when we view them through the framework of Inside Black God.
And there's still more to uncover. Remember, Inside Black God emphasizes the cyclical nature of reality. What if Sambo's father's actions represent not just an individual transformation, but a stage in a larger cycle of evolution and understanding?
Okay, now I'm really curious. It sounds like we need to dive even deeper into this father figure to fully grasp the significance of those tiger skin clothes.
Exactly. Stay tuned for part 3 of this deep dive, where we'll explore the role of Sambo's father in more detail and unravel the final layers of meaning in this deceptively simple children's tale.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of Little Black Sambo through the lens of Inside Black God. And we've covered so much, those symbolic tigers, the butter, those pancakes. But let's finally talk about the character that's been kind of lurking in the background this whole time. Sambo's father.
Yeah, he might seem like a minor character at first, but his actions, particularly at the end of the story, I think, offer some really intriguing insights, especially when we, consider them in the context of Inside Black God.
Right. We left off talking about how Sambo's father wearing those tiger skin clothes might connect to that idea of blackness as the void, that source of infinite potential described in Inside Black God. But I'm still kind of struggling with that. How can clothes made from, defeated challenges symbolize this really abstract concept of the void?
Right. Well, it all comes back to symbolism and how Inside Black God reinterprets these traditional concepts. The void isn't actually empty. It's full of potential energy and possibilities. And Inside Black God links this idea of the void directly to blackness as this primordial creative force. And by wearing those tiger skins, Sambo's father is, in a way, embodying those challenges, those forces of chaos, and integrating them into himself.
So it's not just about wearing trophies of his son's victories. It's about him absorbing these challenges, taking on their power, and transforming it into something else.
Exactly. He's not just watching his son's journey, he's taking part in it, participating in this cycle of creation, destruction, and renewal that Inside Black God talks about. And by wearing those tiger skins, those symbols of what were once fearsome tigers, he shows a level of mastery over those challenges. Like he's transforming them into something that doesn't have power over him anymore.
That's such a powerful image. It reminds me of that idea from Inside Black God, that true understanding doesn't come from just overcoming challenges, but from integrating them.
Exactly. It suggests a level of evolution, not just for Sambo's father, but maybe for his whole lineage. Sambo's journey, his confrontation with the tigers, leads to this transformation for his father, and then he embodies those challenges and maybe even passes this, integrated understanding down to future generations.
So like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Sambo's actions have implications, not just for himself, but for the people who come after him.
Right. And this idea of interconnectedness, that's really central to Inside Blackguard. Our actions, the knowledge we gain, the challenges we face, they all have an impact beyond ourselves.
This has been such an eye-opening look at Little Black Sambo. I'm realizing that even these simple stories can be so profound if we're just willing to look at them from a different perspective.
That's the beauty of exploration, taking familiar stories, applying a new lens, and finding these layers of meaning we never saw before.
So to wrap things up, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What have we learned from this deep dive into Little Black Sambo and Inside Black God?
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of perspective. The way we see the world, the frameworks we use to understand our experiences, that shapes the meaning we find. We reinterpreted Little Black Sambo through Inside Black God, and we can do that with our own lives, with our own stories, and find new insights.
That's a great point. It reminds us to stay curious, be open to new ideas, and never stop exploring.
Who knows? Maybe by shifting our perspective, using new frameworks to understand familiar things, we can unlock our own potential and transform our challenges into something really meaningful.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. We started with this children's story and ended up talking about the nature of reality, the power of language, and the interconnectedness of everything. Thanks for joining us, and remember, keep diving deep.